It's 2:10 a.m. Over the dark waters of the Atlantic, alarms explode inside the cockpit. The autopilot disconnects. A sharp warning tone pierces the silence, and the airspeed goes from 275 knots to 0 in seconds. The co-pilot grips the side stick. "I don't understand what's happening," he shouts. The aircraft is out of control, descending extremely fast. Inside the cabin, 216 passengers are asleep, unaware the aircraft has left controlled flight. In the cockpit, the stall warning blares. "Stall! Stall!" The captain, who was sleeping a minute ago, is back in the cockpit and gets shocked with the chaotic scene. "What are you doing?" The aircraft falls from the sky, 10,000 feet per minute. "We are going to crash! This can't be true!" Then, the inevitable happens. The aircraft hits the water at almost 124 miles per hour. The mystery? How could the most modern aircraft in the world, cruising peacefully over the ocean only 4 minutes ago, could end at the bottom of the ocean? Today, I'm going to tell you the unbelievable story about Air France Flight 447.
I am Captain Jack Mercer. What you're going to watch now is the story from the perspective of a pilot who has lived and seen a lot in 25 years of experience. Welcome aboard. It's May 31st, 2009, 10:29 p.m. On the shimmering coast of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, as the city lights flicker across the bay, Air France Flight 447 is ready for departure. A routine overnight journey to Paris, Charles de Gaulle Airport. The aircraft, an Airbus A330, sleek, modern, equipped with the most advanced automation of its time. The aircraft is filled with 70,400 kilograms, enough for 10 hours and 36 minutes of flight, including reserves and alternates. From the ramp, she looks majestic, 62 meters of wingspan glinting under floodlights. Passengers boarding quietly for a calm red-eye across the Atlantic. It's a 10-hour flight, covering 5,700 nautical miles, cruising through the Intertropical Convergence Zone, a region famous for towering thunderheads, heavy rain and turbulence. But tonight's forecast shows isolated storms. Nothing extraordinary. Well, at least on paper. In the cockpit, 3 pilots prepare for a long night. Captain Marc Dubois, 58 years old, more than 11,000 flight hours, respected, composed, near retirement. First Officer David Robert, 37, 6,500 hours, analytical and calm, and Relief First Officer Pierre Bonin, 32, 2,900 hours, the youngest, enthusiastic, but less experienced at high-altitude manual flying. It's a standard long-haul setup, 1 captain, 2 first officers, rotating rest periods. Now the passengers. There are 216 souls filling the cabin. Families returning from vacation, business travelers, tourists, and crew heading home. Among them, 61 French, 58 Brazilians, and 26 Germans. A global crowd, all trusting the professionalism of the men in the cockpit and the safety of a modern airliner. The cabin crew, 9 flight attendants, move through final checks, securing galleys, welcoming guests, stowing baggage. So, above the equator, the ITCZ, Intertropical Convergence Zone, is alive with towering cumulonimbus clouds, their tops punching beyond 50,000 feet. These massive storm cells stretch like walls across the ocean, brimming with lightning, hail, and ice crystals, invisible to radar. The Air France dispatch briefing noted moderate turbulence along the route, advising minor deviations. No alternate routing was planned. At cruise altitude, those clouds are unavoidable. You don't fly through the heart of them, you weave between, you know? Other flights crossing that same corridor tonight, like Lufthansa 507 and Air Madrid 903, will make wide detours west to skirt the most active areas. But AF 447, following a slightly more direct path, will cut closer to the storm line. But, when you're flying at 35,000 feet,
A slight detour might be the difference between smooth air and chaos, you know? So, it's 10:29 p.m. They take off from runway 10R. The engines roar, the A330 accelerates, and Captain Dubois calls V1, rotate. Bonin eases back on the side stick, the nose lifts gracefully, gear up, and climb the power set. Within minutes, Rio disappears into the darkness below. They climb through FL 100, FL 200, eventually FL 350. The seatbelt sign flicks off. The cabin hums, dinner service begins, passengers settle, movies flicker on seat backs. So far, so good. The night feels routine, a typical transatlantic crossing. From a pilot perspective, at this stage, everything's supposed to be calm. Systems green, weather ahead monitored, and automation doing its job. It's 11:30 p.m. The Airbus levels off at 35,000 feet, steady tailwind, engines humming at N1 89%. Captain Dubois briefs his crew. We'll reach the equator in 2 hours. Some turbulence expected, nothing serious. Then they review the fuel, 68,400 kilograms remaining, and projected ETA Paris is 11:03 a.m. local time. Dubois, following the rest schedule, plans to leave the cockpit for his first break once clear of Brazilian airspace. The crew checks radar. Small returns ahead, amber and green. Nothing alarming yet. Still, Bonin remarks quietly, looks like some big ones forming near the track. When he says big ones, he is talking about storms. He seems worried about it. Robert nods, we'll keep an eye. You know, this is how every long-haul night begins. Calm voices, steady instruments, a sense of quiet confidence. But weather over the equator? It's never something to underestimate, my friend. Now, 1:30 a.m. They are crossing the Intal waypoint. They're leaving Brazilian control, entering Atlantic airspace. The next waypoint? Salpu, 300 nautical miles north. Fuel check is checked, 64,900 kilograms, and flight time so far, 3 hours. Outside, the darkness is total. No stars, just lightning flashes far ahead, illuminating tall cloud towers. Time, 1:50 a.m. Now the turbulence light comes on. The cabin crew pause service, secure carts, and advise passengers to stay seated. Inside the cockpit, dim light glows over checklists and instruments. The temperature outside is minus 43 degrees Celsius, warmer than forecast, a warning sign for ice crystal formation. But it's quiet, still orderly, still routine. But my friend, soon everything will change. It's 1:55 a.m. Flight 447 cruises steadily at 35,000 feet, slicing through darkness over the Atlantic. They contact Brasilia Air Traffic Control. Later, they contact Recife Control, the last traffic control from Brazil, because now they are entering a stretch of oceanic silence, where there's no radar coverage, no direct voice contact, only periodic data messages. So from now on, the aircraft will not be tracked anymore. The night outside is pitch black. Lightning flickers across the horizon, white veins cracking through tower and cloud walls. The intertropical convergence zone lies ahead, a maze of massive cumulonimbus clouds climbing to 50,000 feet.
Let me tell you, this is the part of the world that keeps every pilot on edge. You don't cross the equator at night without a bit of respect. These clouds, they build fast, move fast, and hide surprises inside. Ice, hail, turbulence, you name it.
So, the A330 now flies into the edges of a convective system. Rain splatters the windshield, lightning pulses around them, the radar shows larger storm cells, and they start to talk about ways to avoid the turbulence that the storms could bring. Robert clearly shows that he is worried about the storms coming closer. At 01:46 a.m., he dims the cockpit lights so that he can see better outside. But it was very dark. They could not see anything at all. Now, a light turbulence is rocking the A330. They discuss if they could climb higher, but then they realize that they can't because they are at flight level 370, and the turbulence can get worse. They start to get closer to the storm clouds. So, Captain Dubois sets the autopilot and auto thrust. Once the workload eases, he calls for his scheduled rest. With a 10-hour flight ahead, crew rotation is standard. So, the captain calls Bonin back to the cockpit. Yeah, I forgot to mention that Bonin was the first to leave for his rest around 3 hours ago. So, the captain calls him back. Now, Bonin is back. The captain gets out of his seat, and Bonin takes it. Are you paying attention here? Bonin, the less experienced pilot, takes the pilot flying role, while Robert takes the monitoring role.
So Dubois leaves the cockpit at 1:59 a.m., the aircraft going right to a storm, without giving any specific instructions about how the pilots should deal with the thunderstorms the radar was showing ahead. I believe he did it because he knew that the two pilots had flown that route before and were experienced enough to deal with the situation.
It's 2:05 a.m. The captain is sleeping, and the turbulence intensifies. The flight deck grows tense. Bonin focuses on the radar returns, looking for gaps. Robert monitors systems. The A330 deviates slightly left to avoid the largest cell. So far, all readings remain stable. 2:06 a.m. The first officer calls the cabin crew to tell them to be careful about the turbulence, although it's light for now. It's been 4 minutes since the captain left the cockpit. In 4 more minutes, the emergency will begin. At 2:08 a.m., a heavy rain hits the aircraft. 20 seconds later, ice crystals now hit the plane, producing a loud sound, and the turbulence gets worse. I know, it looks scary, right? But again, until now, all this scenario is routine for pilots, believe me. The pilots are doing their job well, and the aircraft is behaving okay. Keep watching. Now, 2:10:05 a.m. A sharp chime pierces the cockpit. Then, the autopilot disconnects, followed by the auto thrust system. The flight computers, confused by inconsistent airspeed readings, hand full control back to the crew. Bonin, now hand-flying the Airbus, feels a jolt of turbulence. The aircraft is still stable, engines running smoothly, but airspeed data has become crazy. On the primary flight display, the speed tape flickers, 275 knots, 60 knots, blank. The left and right indicators disagree. The standby display shows another number entirely. For the first few seconds, no one fully grasps what's happening. The cockpit fills with alarms, caution tones, flashing messages, and chimes overlapping. Let me confess, this is the kind of moment every pilot trains for. But when it actually happens, it hits like a punch. 1 second you're managing systems, the next you're hand-flying in a thunderstorm with your instruments lying to you. The ECM display, the aircraft's central alert system, flashes 10 different warning messages. Can you imagine how confusing and stressful it is for the pilots? These messages mean one thing: the air data computers don't agree on airspeed. Why? Probably because the pitot tubes, likely blocked by ice crystals, are no longer giving valid readings, but they don't know it. The pitot tube is a critical exterior sensor that measures dynamic pressure to determine an aircraft's airspeed, which is essential for safe flight. Bonin's reaction is instinctive. Believing the aircraft might be overspeeding, based on sudden low readings, he pulls back on the side stick, raising the nose. The pitch increases 10 degrees, 12 degrees, 15 degrees nose up. The aircraft begins to climb, its vertical speed surging upward, 7,000 feet per minute. From a pilot perspective, that's dangerous territory. At cruise altitude, your margin between stall and overspeed is razor thin. If you pitch up too much, you'll lose airspeed fast.
But if your instruments lie, it's hard to trust your instincts. So, with inconsistent airspeed, the flight control system shifts into alternate law, a degraded mode that removes key protections, including stall prevention. Now the airplane will do exactly what the pilots command. No safety net. Inside the cockpit, the environment turns chaotic, chimes overlapping, red flags blinking. The flight director bars disappear. Flight path markers fluctuate. Robert monitors systems, trying to interpret the alerts. Bonin focuses on the attitude indicator, fighting turbulence and sensory overload. By 2:10:35 a.m., the A330 has climbed from 35,000 to 37,000 feet, climbing with a hair-raising 6,900 feet per minute, more than 7 times higher than normal for its weight. Airspeed, unreliable as it is, now shows dangerously low values. The angle of attack increases, the buffet begins, the first physical sign of a stall. Then another alarm blares, the stall warning, stall, stall. For those who don't know, in aviation, a stall is a loss of lift, caused by the airflow over a wing becoming turbulent and separating from the wing's surface, an event that occurs when the angle of attack, the angle between the wing and the incoming air, exceeds a specific critical angle. So, Bonin keeps the side stick back, trying to maintain what he believes is safe pitch. The airplane, however, is losing lift. Robert tries to make sense of the data. He notes the climb, the high pitch, the decaying speed. He begins calling out parameters, attempting to stabilize the situation. But without consistent numbers, each decision is a gamble. Recognizing the complexity of the situation, Robert presses the button to call the captain back to the cockpit. In fact, he pressed several times, desperate. At 2:10 a.m., the Airbus reaches its stall angle of attack, and violent buffeting starts to shake the aircraft. This type of buffeting is of a much higher frequency than turbulence is, and no, it doesn't feel good, you know? Some seconds later, the Airbus starts to fall down towards the ocean below.
It's 2:11 a.m. At this moment, the heating elements clear in the pitot tubes melt the ice around it, and all the indicators at the panel control are working normally again. Now, they have all the information they need to put the aircraft back in control, to go back to a normal and smooth flight again, and land safely in Paris. Good news, right? No, because here is the problem. They don't trust in the indicators anymore. They believe those are still crazy, and that is going to be fatal for all 228 souls on board. Stay here with me. Okay. 2:11 a.m. Bonin says, stressed, "Is he coming or not?" asking about the captain. Around 1.5 minutes after being called, Captain Dubois returns to the cockpit. The jet climbs beyond 38,000 feet and is now approaching its maximum altitude limit for the current weight and losing energy rapidly. Engines remain at climb thrust, but lift is collapsing. Dubois re-enters, assessing the chaos. Flashing warnings, erratic readings, a pitch attitude far steeper than normal cruise. "What are you doing?" he says, stressed. Bonin answers nervously, "What's happening?" "Well, I don't know what's happening." Robert says, "We're losing control of the airplane there." Ronan completes, telling the captain about the situation, and together they try different things to recover the fight. 2:13 a.m. The altitude is 30,000 feet. The stall warning momentarily stops, not because recovery begins, but because the sensors, saturated beyond limits, fall silent. Dubois muttered, "It's impossible," shocked by the fact that he couldn't figure it out. Now, below 15,000 feet, the crew attempts to coordinate inputs, but each correction meets another. Dual input tone sounds again, a subtle reminder that conflicting commands persist. Such an important detail, but none of them pay attention to it, submerged in their drama. Bonin, now desperate, says, "Climb, climb, climb!" And Robert's response, "But I've been at max nose up for a while."
Finally, the captain realizes the main problem. Robert was the one bringing the aircraft nose up and causing the stall. So he yells, "No, no, no, don't climb!" Ronan tries to take control again while the captain urges him to lower the nose. Now they are less than 10,000 feet and confusion freezes coordinated action. The stall warning keeps blaring loud. 2:14 a.m. Ronan has no hopes anymore. He is exhausted by the stress and desperate. He yells, "Damn, we're going to crash." And then, this can't be true. The aircraft system detects the proximity with the water and blares, "Pull up, pull up, pull up." The captain is still giving different instructions, trying everything he could. But at this point, they are less than 2,000 feet and it's too late, my friend. At 2:14:28 a.m., the Airbus 330 slams belly first into the Atlantic Ocean. The impact speed, 124 miles per hour. The impact against the ocean was equivalent to someone being dropped from the 46th floor of a building straight into the ground. The aircraft was immediately shattered into thousands of pieces. In this scenario, of course, nobody survived. 228 souls lost. So 2 days after the crash, the first piece of the Airbus was found, and 3 days later, some victims were recovered from the ocean. But this was just the beginning of a 2-year-long effort to rescue all the victims and find the black boxes. The question, what really happened here? How such a modern aircraft could fall down from the sky like a rock in 4 minutes? How 3 experienced pilots could not save the plane? How did a simple loss of airspeed lead to total loss of control? Well, keep watching, because the truth, when it emerged from the black boxes, stunned the entire aviation world.
Well, when investigators from France's BEA, Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis, finally recovered the black boxes, 2 years later, the truth about Air France Flight 447 stunned even veteran accident analysts. What appeared at first to be a mysterious mid-air breakup or sudden weather-related failure was in reality a textbook example of how a simple technical fault can spiral into catastrophe when combined with fatigue, confusion, and cockpit breakdown. At 2:10 a.m., while cruising at FL 350, the A330 flew through a storm cell filled with supercooled ice crystals. These microscopic particles, invisible on radar, clogged the pitot tubes, the tiny sensors that measure airspeed. Within seconds, all 3 airspeed indicators began giving conflicting readings. The aircraft's computers, detecting unreliable airspeed, disengaged the autopilot and auto thrust. Instantly, control passed back to the human pilots. This wasn't a structural failure or a lightning strike. It was a loss of reliable data. The airplane itself remained fully functional, but the sudden handover in total darkness at high altitude triggered a startle effect and cognitive overload. Relief Officer Bonin, now the pilot flying, instinctively pulled back on the side stick, a move that caused the aircraft to climb steeply, lose airspeed, and eventually stall. Despite repeated stall warnings, the crew never identified the situation. Why? I think it's because at high altitude, a fully developed stall behaves differently. The nose-up attitude and vibration can feel like turbulence, and the sensation of falling tricks the inner ear. The lack of visual horizon sealed the illusion, The Airbus flight control system entered alternate law, removing its angle of attack protection. In normal law, the computers prevent a stall by automatically lowering the nose, but in alternate law, the pilot's inputs are absolute. Bonin's continuous backward pressure kept the wings beyond their critical angle of attack for nearly 4 minutes.
A stall at altitude, while dangerous, is recoverable if recognized. The correct action was simple, but counterintuitive. Push the nose down to regain speed. Roll wings level. Reduce thrust to prevent pitch up. That's it. But instead, the crew did the opposite. Full nose up, full thrust, worsening the stall. The captain's late return added another layer of confusion. Without clear delegation, all 3 pilots issued commands simultaneously. The dual input system, averaging conflicting side stick movements, created neutral output, meaning the airplane often ignored recovery attempts. Ultimately, the jet struck the ocean wings level,
still stalled, descending at 10,000 feet per minute. The engines were running, the systems intact, but aerodynamically, the plane was no longer flying, period. But now let's talk about how the accident improved aviation, because I always like to emphasize that no accident is in vain. They always force aviation to be safer and safer.
The BEA's final report didn't just blame one pilot. It blamed a system, training gaps, over-reliance on automation, and weak emphasis on manual flying skills. Flight 447 became a turning point, forcing airlines, regulators, and pilots worldwide to ask, are we training aviators or just system managers? The answer, unfortunately, could not be denied. Yes, pilots had become too dependent on technology and too distant from the raw art of flying. Myself included, I confess. I mean, when we go training in flight simulators, we spend more time dealing with system management than really manual flying. This is our reality, you know?
So, the BEA's final report issued sweeping recommendations, not just for Air France, but for the entire global industry. Let me tell you those I think are most important. Manual flying skills. Airlines were urged to strengthen basic attitude and power training. Crews needed to know how to fly pitch and power when instruments fail, without waiting for automation to return.
Stall recognition and recovery. New emphasis was placed on understanding high-altitude stalls, a regime rarely practiced before. Simulators worldwide were updated to replicate alternate law behavior and deep stall scenarios. Cockpit communication. The accident exposed a breakdown of crew resource management, CRM. Training now stressed assertiveness, role clarity, and challenge response, ensuring every pilot speaks up when something feels wrong. Pitot tube improvements. Airbus and other manufacturers redesigned pitot probes to resist ice crystal blockage, reducing the risk of unreliable airspeed events. Monitoring and startle training. Regulators introduced new modules on startle effect and automation surprise, teaching pilots how to manage sudden shifts from automated flight to manual control. For aviators worldwide, Flight 447 became a reminder. When automation fails, you must still fly the airplane. So a lot of us were back in the simulators, putting ourselves in a stall situation to be sure that we were able to recover a flight without depending 100% on the automation system, including me, to be true. I mean, you never know, right? Now, very important, if this story moved you, please give this video a like and you will make my day. Because I'm not lying. It requires days of hard work to bring a new episode to you. And, of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Okay? I'm Captain Jack Mercer. Fly safe. And I'll see you in the next one.